Welcome back, everybody, to the Aurora Show. Today, I'm going to talk about the blue full moon that is upcoming. Um, oh, okay. I'm going to talk about the blue Sagittarius, and this is a very interesting full moon to me, right? Because for one, I did talk about in my May report that May was a transitional month, right? I mean, I could talk about 2026 forever, right? So we had this huge month of activation, which was February. March was the month of it was a wild card. There was a lot of experimentation. There was eclipse season. It was a lot of almost reshuffling of things in our life. A lot of purging in the body. Like basically after that activation, everything had to be reshuffled, right? To align with whatever was activated. And then we had April, which was the hyper acceleration month, 7 planets in Aries, wild behavior. Uranus entered Gemini on April 30th. And that was like a whirlwind, okay? May was this transitional month, and I called it the month of blessings because we really started to see everything that we had planted the seeds of starting to take root and starting to blossom. And I did say, blessings come in many forms. There can be a straight blessing, there can be a lesson as a blessing, there can be a blessing in disguise, right? And I think this month has really lived up to that. Now, we started out the month, right? May 1st, Beltane, with a full moon in Scorpio. That was a really visceral full moon. That whole first week of May was almost this like deep excavation. And again, it's that Taurus Scorpio axis, which has been disrupted for 8 years because of Uranus there. And so it was a lot about worth. It was a lot about, Taurus is about our worth and what we value in life. And Scorpio as its sister sign is kind of similar, but Scorpio actually craves, sometimes Scorpio enjoys chaos a little bit, enjoys crisis, because they understand that it's a breakdown to break through, right? And that is kind of Scorpio's gig, is they do want to find security in life as well, just like its sister sign of Taurus. But Taurus wants to find, security and stability in life by having nothing change. And I actually think Scorpio is a little bit more open to change, although they can fall in very much to control and possessiveness. But the difference there is that Taurus really wants status quo. It wants consistency. It doesn't want a lot of up and downs. Scorpio actually thrives in the up and downs. And it's simply because what they're trying to find is emotional security and emotional stability. And on some level, they know that they can't actually find that unless they go through internal crises, unless they go through those deep, tough, visceral emotions. They won't find that emotional security within themselves, right? And so that's an interesting mix between the two. But we started out the month with some real deep excavation in that way. And then we had that new moon in Taurus, which was conjunct fixed star algol. I talked about that. I really loved that new moon. We planted a lot of intentions during that time. And now we're going to end the month on May 31st with a blue moon in Sagittarius, right? And of course, blue moons are more rare. That's why they're called that, right? It's once in a blue moon. So this one's really interesting because, again, this is leading us into June, which is the beginning of first contact summer. And so I think the nature of this being at the last day of the month, where we also had a full moon at the first day of the month, tells us a lot about this transitional month of May. Like, we are in a process here. And so the blue moon in Sag, right? Let's talk about that. So that is going to be on the 31st. Now, it does peak really however you want to call it, late at night or early in the morning on the 31st. So it's going to peak around 2:45 a.m. Mountain Time. So about 4:44 a.m. Eastern Time on the 31st, right? And so this is going to be a full moon at 9 degrees Sagittarius, which interestingly is a Sagittarian degree. And it's going to be opposing the sun at 9 degrees Gemini, right? Now, what else do we have in the mix here? So for one is we will have Mercury in Gemini, right? But it's going to be at the critical degrees. So Mercury is going to be at the 28th degree of Gemini. So not in a direct interaction with this full moon, but almost like Mercury is going to be carrying the message of this full moon as it moves forward. And early June, I think it's June 1st, Mercury will enter Cancer. And so we have to think about the Gemini Sagittarius axis now, because that's the axis that's being disrupted now, right? With Uranus now in Gemini. And so this full moon is going to have a different flavor. Again, we're very used to the past 8 years where every Taurus transit was going to interact with Uranus. Any like full moon in Scorpio or Scorpio transits were going to oppose Uranus. So we were used to that axis, and now we're looking at a different axis, okay? And so the Gemini Sagittarius axis is all about information and truth. It's information, truth, wisdom, experience, knowledge, and vision. Right? And so the Gemini portion of the axis, you could call Gemini the information gatherer and the information sharer. Okay. Gemini is a transmitter. So they are simply picking up all the things, all of the ideas, all of the information, all of the facts. They are the ones who are accumulating, if you will, all the pieces of the puzzle. And then their job is to communicate that out. So in many ways, Gemini is a connector, right? They are an antenna of information that they bring in and send out. Now, Sagittarius does, of course, accumulate information, but they do this in a very different way. Sagittarius is more about gaining information and wisdom through actual experience, right? Whereas Gemini is going to be pulling from news articles, videos, research, conversations, right? Gemini is pulling the information and the knowledge from real life experience or from what we call higher learning, right? Which you'll hear a lot of that phrase being spoken in terms of the 9th house in Sagittarius. To me, higher learning, you know, in its shadow, it's become things like, you know, college and graduate school, becoming an expert in something. It basically means you've dedicated a long period of time into understanding something, okay? Higher learning. We're not just getting surface level information, which is more Gemini-esque. But with Sagittarius, I think the real higher of it is, again, gaining that wisdom and knowledge through actual lived experience, right? And this is how Sagittarius discovers the truth, okay? So when you take information or a theory, let's say, you have to put it into practice. You have to take that hypothesis or that theory and you have to test it. Does it actually work? How does it translate into real life function, right? That's a lot of the Gemini Sagittarius aspect. And Sagittarius does have a higher vision. Like they are looking up, right? They come after Scorpio where we're looking down. We're looking deep into the depths. And then we get into Sagittarius and they're looking up. And this is where we get to ask the questions, like the more existential questions of like, what are we here for? What is life about, right? What does love mean? What is the universe? Like we start to ask existential questions, and it's the first sign that really, I think, starts to delve more into like spirituality, right? Of kind of trying to understand what the soul is and what we're here for and what life is about. And again, they do this often from real life experience, from diving into the world and kind of figuring it out that way, right? So it's an interesting moon to have at the end of the month, because I feel it's going to carry definitely a certain energy around information coming out, truth. And again, Gemini Sagittarius axis is being disrupted. So we are going to have to learn how to learn, unlearn, and relearn. That's going to be the core of this Uranus and Gemini transit. We cannot stay stuck on what we think we know. We have to be open to new information. We have to be able to unlearn things that we learned, right? That are no longer valuable, no longer relevant, no longer applicable. And we need to relearn. And then with the Sagittarian part of that axis, that's going to change our belief systems. That's going to change our vision and the way we see the world and the way we understand life, right? So that, I think, is what this full moon is carrying. It is kind of a trumpet blaring of like, things are changing, right? And there might be some truths or some information or some perspective shifts that are required, right, to move forward. Now, Uranus is going to be at the 2nd degree of Gemini, so it's too loose of an orb to be considered a conjunction with the sun or an opposition to the moon, but it's there, okay? So they're going to be in a 7-degree, almost 8-degree orb apart. And so again, not close enough for me to consider it a conjunction with the sun or an opposition to the moon, but nonetheless, he's there. He's in the mix, right? And so with Uranus opposing the moon very, very loosely, again, there's going to be question marks, questionings of what we thought we knew, questionings of the vision. Again, some of the shadows of Sagittarius, because they seek to find truth, and they also are a very spiritual sign. Remember, they are ruled by Jupiter, right? And Jupiter was the ancient ruler of both Sagittarius and Pisces. And we tend to associate Pisces more with spirituality, right? With the kind of oneness, energy, the kind of seeking of the merge back into unconditional love, right? Understanding energy and how energy and spirit works. And so we tend to associate those things more with Pisces now, maybe because of its modern rulership of Neptune, but nonetheless, Jupiter is the ancient ruler of both of these signs. And so they both carry a spiritual undertone. And so there also might be some deep questioning moving forward. And again, this is going to tie into my First Contact Summer series, okay, where I'm going to talk a lot about the future timeline and New Earth and First Contact and what that means, and galactics and other dimensions and the higher self and source, right? And so that's the phase we're moving into. You know, there's a lot of theories out there, and I have contemplated all of them, right? Of like, what is it going to take for the masses of humanity to kind of wake up and get on board with what's happening here? Okay, let's just get to the point of what is happening here, okay, and what our job is and what we need to do to move forward. And it's almost like we've tried everything. So if you remember back from 2020 to 2022, mid 2020 to early 2022, the North Node was in Gemini and the South Node was in Sagittarius. And we had a lot of disclosure-esque, a lot of battles of information, a lot of he said, she saids, a lot of different narratives going on, right? And over time, you know, we've had a lot of disclosure, and it doesn't seem to have had any effect for the most part. And so I think the main theory that most people, awakened people, have is that there's got to be something, and this is my feeling too, in order to awaken. Some people, right, especially the first wavers, a lot of us woke up through the finding of information. Okay, we found information that resonated for us, that activated something in our bodies, something in our soul, right, that led us down the journey. I think, and that's very Gemini, I think we're at the point now where the remaining masses, They have to experience it. They've had all the information. The information is out there, okay? I've told my own story many times, but I started researching and diving into disclosure, ascension, awakening, whatever you want to call it, back in 2011. So, and it was hard to find stuff back then, by the way. You actually had to work at it. And then over time, information became more available, more circulated, now also more convoluted, and so we have to look at that and say, okay, so the masses have access to all this information now, right? And it's still like, it's not clocking. It's not clicking up here somewhere. So they're going to have to experience it. Okay. And that's the Sagittarian part of the access. So I do believe that this blue moon is opening up this window, right? Moving into first contact summer, where it's possible that there again is more disclosure. We have the UFO files. The second portion has been dropped. Again, I'm not super hyped about any of this shit. You're not going to hear me talk about that in my series because I just don't care. I just don't fucking care. At this point, you're just telling me things I already know. I'm bored and I don't care. That's just how I feel about it. And I think it doesn't matter anymore. Right? Again, we saw this with Epstein files. We saw this with a lot of whistleblowers and leaks and disclosure of information over years. We can even, talk about the Q movement. I know there's a lot of shadow energy in that, but there was a lot of disclosure as well. I don't know. We're sitting here today almost in the same predicament. And so at this point, I, along with probably many of you, feel like the rest of the masses just need to have the experience. That is the only thing that's when they literally see it, feel it, touch it, taste it, smell it. Unfortunately, they're working through the five senses, and that's what we're working with here, right? So I do feel that this moon is opening up a window of that, right? Uranus and Gemini loosely opposing this moon is like, oh, well, if you're not going to be open to new information, and it's not going to be integrated, you're not going to take that new information and actually do something with it, meaning you change your behavior, you change your perspective on life, you start questioning things, you start wanting to learn and relearn and communicate and share and absorb new information. If you don't want to do that, then you're going to have to live it. And I do feel that that's the message of this blue moon. And so Pluto is at 5 degrees of Aquarius, so it is in a trine to the sun. It is in a trine to Uranus, and it's in a sextile to the moon in Sagittarius. Remember, I'll be talking all about Pluto retrograde for the summertime. That is the dropping of the veil between us and what we call the outer bounds. Space, the unknown, galactics, UFOs, whatever you want to call it, it's the out of bounds. It's what is beyond the normal realm. Pluto is tearing down the veil between that in this retrograde. So now the other very interesting part of this blue moon is that we have the North Node at 4 degrees Pisces under this full moon and the South Node at 4 degrees Virgo. Okay, those are mutable signs. We have the sun in Gemini and the moon in Sag. And of course, Uranus in Gemini. Those are mutable signs. Okay. Now, they are within a 5-degree orb. So technically, they are, and different astrologers use different types of orbs. Obviously, the tighter the orb, the more exact the aspect that's being made. But I'll take that 5-degree orb. Okay. There's a 5-degree orb here. So technically, if we are going to use the most common, which is a 6-degree orb, there is a grand cross happening under this blue moon. Okay. And a grand cross occurs when you have planets, or in this case, we have nodes, which are mathematical points, all in the same modality sign. In this case, it's mutable. Okay. So you got the North Node in Pisces here, got the South Node in Virgo here. Okay. They are both squaring the sun in Gemini and the moon in Sagittarius. And vice versa. The moon in Sagittarius and the sun in Gemini are both squaring the nodes. So it is technically a grand cross. It's a little bit of a wider orb than, I'd like, but it's there. And this feels so fated. Now, I've talked about grand crosses before because we've had quite a few in the last couple of years. So you can have a cardinal cross, you can have a mutable cross, you can have a fixed cross, okay? They all have different flavors to them. And of course, it matters what planets are involved in the cross, right? In this case, Uranus is involved in the cross. Okay, Uranus is actually in the tightest orb between him and the nodes. And I did speak about that briefly, but that'll also be in my first Contact Summer series. He's going to square the nodes exactly on June 12th. And so mutable crosses, and when you have multiple squares and you have a cross, mutable energy is by nature chaotic. And this is the reason, because fixed crosses or fixed energy is foundational. Think of fixed energy as it is the foundation of your house. Okay, you don't want that shit moving. Okay, you don't want it weak. You don't want it moving. You don't want it cracking. You don't want it changing. Okay, you want that shit to be fixed. Okay, now cardinal energy. So if we had a cardinal cross, for instance, the point is that there's tension between all of them. Okay, there's tension. So if you were to have a fixed cross, every point in that cross is stubborn as fuck. None of them want to move because that is their nature. It's like, don't push me, don't move me, don't try to change me, right? And so that type of cross, you have a lot of tension. I call the fixed cross energy, or even if we had like a T-square in fixed energy, it's combustible because none of them want to change. None of them want to move. They're all holding their position as they should. Okay. But somebody's got to give in somewhere, right? Because otherwise the pressure becomes so big that it combusts. That's the energy when we have fixed crosses. When we have cardinal crosses, they're all leadership signs. So think of like putting a bunch of all leaders in one room, okay? That's where you can get a lot of ego as well, also with the fixed, but everybody's trying to lead. Everyone's trying to make the decision. Everyone's trying to decide how to move forward. Everyone wants to initiate. Everyone has an agenda and wants to take action somewhere. And so with cardinal crosses, you get energy that is very palpable. And you've got to decide who's leading in the room, okay? Which direction are we going? Remember, the cardinal signs represents the seasons. So it would be like putting all the seasons in one room, and you've got to decide who's in charge here. That's the energy of cardinal crosses. Now, mutable crosses, by nature, mutable energy is flexible, malleable, it flows, it changes, it transmutes, okay? So when you have that kind of cross, it is chaotic, okay? Because everyone in the room, it's kind of like putting it, if you hear that, there's different personality types sometimes. There's like type A, type B, now they call, like there's type C and whatever else. But we know type A's and type B's, right? It's like taking a bunch of type B's and putting them in a room and asking them to plan something together, right? It's chaotic because everyone's like, go with the flow. Pisces is like, whatever, man, I'll just do like, I'll go with the flow. I'll follow the syncs. Like, I don't care what happens. And Sagittarius wants to like go for the adventure. They want to be spontaneous. They don't want too many rules. They don't want too much planning. It really like, dampens their vibe. And then Virgo's over there like having a nervous breakdown because they need some sort of plan, some sort of efficiency here. But there's too many moving parts and they can't deal with it all, right? And then you've got Gemini who's got 5 million fucking ideas and they can't choose one. And that is the energy of a mutable Grand Cross. And with Uranus's presence there, again, this is really fated. And to me, it's so indicative of what we're moving into. But this blue moon it's a melting pot. A million things can be happening at once. We don't really know which way it's going to go, but we know that it's everything all at once. And there is going to be some chaotic energy, but this is very fated because the nodes are involved, right? If we were talking about different planets, there would be a different interpretation, okay? But you have a full moon, a blue moon, which has a rare signal to it. It's happening at a Sagittarian degree. It's got Uranus involved, and it's got the fucking nodes of fate involved. Something very interesting is going to come from this blue moon. And again, this is not a full moon to plan anything. This is like to just let the balloon pop and the confetti land where it may, if you will. But I do feel that this is going to carry a message, right? And so I'm going to give you a little bit more insight here. This blue moon will be at technically 9 degrees, but rounded up to 10 degrees. And it's going to be happening in Gene Key 9, okay? And Gene Key 9 is part of the Ring of Light. So that's a very interesting codon ring. And the shadow here is inertia. Okay, and so this is excerpts from Richard Rudd's book of the Gene Keys, where he calls this shadow the domestication of dreams. And he said that most human beings live lives where they simply get by. Lives in which they become victims of all the details around them. At the higher frequencies, you tame the small by applying your energy only to that which serves a higher purpose. However, at the shadow frequency, the details tame you, sapping your life force and robbing you of your enthusiasm and eventually pulling you into the common human state of inertia. He said the Chinese sage Lao Tzu, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, uttered the famous phrase, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step." Although a more accurate translation might be, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath one's feet." This piece of timeless wisdom concerns focusing on what lies right in front of you rather than concerning yourself with where the future might or might not take you. This shadow is about where you place that focus and primarily through your daily activities. There is something magical about this gene key because it holds one of the greatest secrets: how to stop your mind from undermining your destiny. At the shadow frequency, the stepping stones go in a circle, so that as you look down at each step, you fail to realize that you are simply following the same old footprints and your energy is going nowhere. Basically, that we operate in loops, okay? We do the same shit every day, day in and day out, because we are completely trapped in a world of meaningless details, meaningless information, meaningless things that we have to do, like paperwork. And, everything nowadays is so complicated, right? There's all these things you have to do, and none of it makes sense. And all of it's time consuming and complicated and literally just drains our energy, right? We are saturated every day with meaningless fucking information, meaningless news, meaningless conversation. And we just live in Groundhog Day. Now, this full moon, guaranteed, again, is going to shake that up, because we cannot stay. And interestingly, Uranus, who's obviously very much involved in this whole configuration, he currently sits in Gene Key 20, which is part of the 2027 Incarnation Cross. We'll talk about that later in the year. But the shadow of Gene Key 20 is superficiality. And it's exactly this, very similar. It's basically that we're focused on all the surface level shit in life that doesn't matter. And we're not actually present in the moment. We're just full of distraction, right? And so he goes on to say, at the gift level, the stepping stone goes off into the distance and over the horizon. You do not know where they are going, but it doesn't matter. You know that they are leading you forward. This makes every step you take all important as well as an adventure. This gene key is about finding the right daily activity in your life. Every step must lead you in the direction of your dreams, whatever that may be. And so he basically says that the daily stuff, the mundane chores that we have to do, the daily little things that we're doing, he said this can still lead us in the direction of our dreams and they can still be fulfilling. But we have to have a vision. We have to have a vision, right? Pluto and Gene Key 41, okay, is about vision. If we don't have a vision for our lives, we're just going on a fucking hamster wheel. We're not actually going anywhere. We're not accomplishing anything. We're not evolving. We're not growing, right? And again, this is why I do feel that most of us agree that probably having some sort of out of this world or paranormal experience, or, you know, for a lot of us who've had very kind of like very odd spiritual experiences, right, that added to our awakening, I think that that's the only thing left. To break the masses out of this kind of mundane loop, right? And to be like, hey, there's a bigger picture going on here. There's a bigger story, right? If Gemini's the researcher and the person who gathers the research, the news anchor, the reporter, right? They're just giving you the news as it comes, right? As it's flying in, they're reporting on it, if you will, right? A radio host, a blogger, right? Sagittarius is about what's the bigger story. Sagittarius is more of like the deeper journalism, if you will. It's like, what's the bigger story here? And I think that that is what this moon is telling us. There's a bigger story here. And if we don't have the understanding of that bigger story, that vision, that purpose, we're going to get lost in all of this mundane shit. And I do think this full moon's going to radically kind of shake that up, if you will. So he basically says that every time you allow life to leave you bored or indifferent, or you feel a lack of energy, it is up to you and you alone to reconnect with your dream. Without a sense of higher purpose, human beings move in circles, creating energy fields that prevent abundance. Even worse, the inertia of this shadow feeds off the victim mind, which all goes round and round in its patterns of blaming or worrying. In our hearts, however, all human beings are natural rebels. We are wild creatures. We are not here on earth to have our dreams tamed, clipped, or domesticated. We are here to make magic happen, and we cannot do that unless our every waking moment is directed and focused toward a single vision or ideal. And that's exactly what I feel that this moon is about. It's about regaining humanity's vision, and individually, right? What is your dream? What is your vision? Remember, Sagittarius is big picture. And I think with Uranus's involvement here, it's also telling us, like, don't get caught up in the details of how it's going to happen. Just take the steps towards it. Let the universe fill in the details, right? Let love handle the details. And that's very much the North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo involved in this cross. The North Node in Pisces quite literally is let love handle the details. Do not fucking worry about it. While the South Node in Virgo is crying deep tears because they cannot understand the logistics, and they cannot analyze the situation, and they cannot plan. Trust me, for all my Virgo placements like me, we've been crying tears for a long time since last January, because that South Node in Virgo was like, hey, your plans, not gonna matter, okay? Your overanalyzation and your list making and your you might as well throw that out the window, okay? Burn it. And but I actually really have enjoyed. In hindsight, I didn't enjoy it, but I am enjoying it now. That South Node in Virgo, it's taught me a lot, because I do have major Virgo placements, my Mercury and my Venus. So it's been a real letting go process. But I've actually realized how much more enjoyable life is when I don't try to figure out the details. And that's a lot of what this moon is saying too, because all these other influences here are adding to this storyline of Gene Key 9, right? And so he says that basically this shadow drains our energy field. It drains our physical body. Like we slowly die. because we lose the enthusiasm for life. We lose excitement. We lose a sense of fulfillment. Okay, now he says that it closes down the energy systems of the body, and it closes them down to higher voltage and cosmic high frequency energies. And remember, I started talking in January about how this year was the year of the higher voltage, right? We do have to integrate the higher voltage energy. We have to be, our nervous systems have to be able to handle more. And this shadow here is a big preventative of that, right? And so basically he says if your life force is low or lacking in energy, you're finding it hard to get enthused about life, this shadow is usually the main culprit. You are either too focused on the future instead of giving your full attention to the present moment, or there is no sense of overall purpose moving beneath your daily activities. And so the gift that we're moving into here is determination. He said, the gift of determination is built upon the rock of very small acts, right? It's basically putting one foot in front of the other, staying present every moment, and the intentional acts, if they're all fulfilling a higher vision and a higher purpose, then we don't need to rush ahead. We don't need to figure out the next 25 steps. We just need to take this step, right? And then this step leads to this step and to this one. And that's where the focus needs to come into. So he said, a person without an ideal burning inside them is essentially destined to remain a follower of the crowd. This gift, however, does have the power of repetition. This gift creates a groove, and once that groove is dug, all energy in your life will follow the same pattern. When you break out of the lower frequency of inertia and you connect with your vision or ideal as a feeling and a deep knowing inside of you, you have truly begun the journey of 1,000 steps. Every step you take from that moment on, which means all acts, no matter how small, lead in the direction of that core vision. The more determined you become, the less energy you actually have to use. So again, this is also about consistency, right? This is contrary to the common view of determination, which is usually that it's some great battle or struggle. But the secret of determination is momentum. All the little acts done with the heart begin to build up an inner momentum that eventually becomes unstoppable. The force of the entire universe begins to gather behind such a person. It is only at the beginning that you have to use great force to get out of the shadow of inertia, right? Basically apathy, and takes enormous strength. But once you get into that consistency and that step by step, the momentum just builds, right? And finally, he says the 9th gift has an important connection to the power of magnetism. All life is magnetic, and this gift employs the use of magnetism through aligning itself with the true north, the inner direction and rhythm sought by the universe as a whole. Your true course in life is already chosen, and all you have to do is follow it. The radical shifts in your mental functioning will further serve to streamline the course of your life. Your mind begins to submerge itself into more collective awareness. Not only does it undermine you less and less, but it also confirms that your direction is valid. And then, of course, we get to the Siddhic state here, which is called invincibility. Of course, we usually focus on the gift here, but I'll just give you a little excerpts of the Siddhic state. It's called the final frontier. And he says, when humanity managed to tame the power of the atom, the basic magnetic unit of matter, we unlocked its tremendous energy and demonstrated a great universal law. The smaller something becomes, the more condensed the universal energy within it. This law can be applied to your individual life. There is one final surprise lying in wait for us within this gene key, and it is found in the Siddhi of invincibility. The 9th Siddhi is about the power of the infinitesimal, I don't know if I said that right, the infinitely small. The infinitely small is also the paradoxical. If one goes on dividing a piece of string in half, you could theoretically go on forever. At the highest levels of consciousness, levels disappear entirely. Outer space becomes inner space. Time becomes infinite, yet present. The moment something loses all boundaries, it becomes two contrary things, defenseless and invincible. Invincibility can therefore be defined as merging your individual consciousness back into the consciousness of the universe. And he says to be invincible is to also be invisible, and vice versa. The only force in the universe that is truly invincible is love. Love knows only giving, so it creates a vacuum which in turn continuously floods with more love. When a human being attains this siddhi, their life becomes an expression of the invincible of such love. What the ninth siddhi teaches us today is that every act you take is of vast importance to evolution, the whole of evolution. If your life takes on a cosmic focus, then life itself will intensify within you, moving you naturally into more cooperative patterns. Every intentional act is magical, setting in motion either a force of creativity or a force of decay. The first few steps are critical to your evolution and in the time ahead. You must capture the energy of your dream and hold on to it deep inside, because it is that dream that will act as the lens to focus the power of magic and manifestation in your life. So happy blue moon in Sag, everybody. I will be hosting the June astrology gathering on the blue moon in Sagittarius this Sunday on May 31st. So if you would like to RSVP for that, it is up on the website. And we're going to be talking all about the first month of First Contact Summer, and June has a lot of powerful and really fascinating transits that I think we need to harness and really get off the summer to a good start. So for those of you joining me, I will see you Sunday, and happy blue moon to everybody.